let's continue with the next speaker. We're happy to have with us Jan Osenberg, who's the head of system integration at SolarPower Europe, basically overseeing everything from small to big systems that are installed to the grid. Jan will tell us a little bit about the policy scene, what's happening in Brussels. His topic is enabling the next wave of distributed solar policy frameworks for greater flexibility. Jan.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Let me share my slides with you. The EU policy framework is advancing to facilitate new business models or the future smart demand response heavy business models for rooftop PV. The next steps that the EU is now taking is electrification and building the energy security framework. These are two opportunities that we can use for rooftop PV, and I will show you how SolarPower Europe is planning on doing this. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the market data on the PV market. Then what have been the changes that have been made in the past legislative mandate and which are being implemented at the moment, and the EU's next steps to keep this momentum going. A few first words about SolarPower Europe to those of you who have not heard of us yet. We are the association for the solar PV industry. We do lobbying in Brussels. We provide market intelligence on all segments, quite granular information also on rooftop PV, but also on batteries and on jobs, increasingly also on other topics like mounting structures. We do facilitate international developments of companies, and lastly, we provide networking for strategic insights and getting in touch with potential customers or partners with the same mission. Voilà, 310 members, among them 45 national associations, and we have won 10 awards in the past few years for Best Podcast, Best Engagement, Best Event, Best Association General, showing our impact and the services we provide to the industry. Who are in our membership? We represent the entire value chain, from the manufacturers of the modules of the inverter to the developers, the people who really build utility scale or rooftop projects, but then also service providers, the new digital service providers that provide demand response or O&M. Now, going into the rooftop market. The rooftop market is undergoing a transition from feed-in tariffs or a support scheme, heavy schemes, towards system integration and new business models. Especially the residential market is at the moment under quite a challenge. We've seen the residential market decline from 17.5 gigawatt annual growth in 2023 to 10.6 gigawatts in 2025. Following an ease of customer awareness for electricity prices and the withdrawal of support schemes from countries. What we are seeing, despite these more difficult conditions, is that C&I is more resilient, showing that businesses have understood the opportunity from rooftop PV. And however, this is of course dependent heavily on the market. The segment below 250 kilowatt is quite under some pressure, but all the big buildings, everything above 200 kilowatt, is still growing. In total, the entire PV market, including utility scale installations, is expected to decline by 1.4% this year. So it's quite a difficult situation that we're in. But some markets are still performing strongly. So let's go a little bit more into the details. On the left of the slide, you see market data graphs indicating growth in the respective markets and segments. In the residential markets, we see problems in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Sweden, in Poland, and in Germany. So that's of course the big markets that will impact growth. However, we do see an increased awareness of new business models and are anticipating a more resilient growth in the future at single digits thanks to more innovative providers coming up. In the C&I segment, as I've said, overall a reasonably stable market. Also here we are anticipating single-digit growth. Outstanding is the growth in France, which is supported by high feed-in tariffs. So we stand to be seen if this remains. There is quite a political backlash in France at the moment. Germany and Poland have proven successful, have proven stable, partly because of auctions in the segment above 750 kilowatt in Germany, but also for self-consumption benefits of businesses. The downward trend we also see in Italy, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Now, the reason for this is of course a phase out of the support schemes that we are seeing. On the left, you see compensation for injections for residential PV. On the bottom graph, you see compensation for C&I PV injections. And an increasing number of countries is phasing out injection support schemes, but also CapEx support schemes are being considerably lowered. For example, in Italy, which had this very generous support scheme, this is being lowered. So now countries are moving more and more to a market-based compensation model, which promote and build heavily on self-consumption. This allows and is increasingly opening up battery participation into markets, into balancing markets, and combining all the services that you had with rooftop PV with a battery. We also see countries increasingly moving not to compensation at average prices, but actually at hourly market prices. So you see Sweden is a front runner. Poland is also doing it in residential, but also Greece is compensating injections at hourly prices, which of course is an incentive to optimize your generation and your demand using storage and EVs and heat pumps. Now, investment is going heavily now into behind the meter and front of the meter batteries. We have seen 100% growth between 2020 and 2023 and 2024. This is now, let's say, slowing down a little bit. We're expecting to reach 30%, 40%, 50% growth rates in the years to come. Now, the residential segment batteries have been declining a little bit due to the decline in the general market in residential, but also to the drop in the support schemes for the residential installations. C&I installations are not so much subsidy dependent. They are increasingly participating in spot markets and ancillary services where they can get a strong business case. The battery market is quite concentrated into a number of countries, indicating that this is a trend that pertains to just a few countries, and the others still have to open up to the opportunities with batteries. So particularly 2/3 of the battery fleet was located in Germany and Italy in 2024, especially in the residential segment. We expect the diversification to set in, but still we expect in 2029, 70% of the battery capacity to be located in just 5 markets. So that's Germany, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, and Poland, where we expect batteries to kick off. Outlining, of course, that the flexibility revolution still needs to kick off on the broader scale. We see that the regulation is increasingly ready. We have seen, for example, the EU adopt the EU solar standard, a requirement to install solar PV on buildings. Last year, EU countries must now implement this by mid-2026, and this will make sure that your PV installation is a building element, just like lighting or just like a fire extinguisher. You just have a PV installation, which facilitates the integration with construction processes, but increasingly also with electrical loads. The moment that building planners start thinking about solar PV in a more integrated fashion. This is a progressive phase-in of these requirements to install solar PV, starting 2026 with the requirement that buildings must be designed properly for PV. But then the strong requirements come from 2027 with new public and C&I buildings. required to be equipped. Then from 2028, public and C&I under renovation must be equipped. And then from 2030, it will be new residential buildings that must be equipped. Public, the big part is also public buildings. All the existing public buildings must be now have a PV installation, and that phases in progressively until 2030. So this is really all the universities, all the public facilities, swimming pools, libraries, your local churches, hospitals. All of these buildings will need a PV installation, and that is a mandate. Of course, there are going to be quite some exemptions, technical requirements based on economic feasibility. So we expect a big push from there. And this goes significantly beyond the solar standards that we already have in the EU. In total, we expect this to have a big impact on the market. We modeled that the theoretical potential is almost 200 gigawatts. So that is huge. Still, we will have to look at the exact exemptions and the real criteria that impact the growth to see if this is correct. It will certainly be lower than this. For example, factors that that impact this are the renovation rate among C&I buildings has an impact, any type of technical and economical exemptions, the number of new buildings that are built every single year also supports the PV growth. But lastly, also how fast will the public sector pick up PV installations? We have seen that the public sector has been one of the slowest to adopt PV, and now we expect them to become the front runner. So there's likely going to be some challenges in there. Lastly, the EPBD, or then another thing what the EPBD does is it really supports smart buildings by requirements for having building automation and control systems, so energy management systems in C&I buildings. There's also a requirement for buildings or parking lots to be EV ready. So there's a hard requirement to install EV charging infrastructure on large parking spaces, but also pre-cabling on another number of new parking spaces. We also see the phase out of subsidies for fossil fuel boilers, which we expect to boost heat pump development. Now, what we also see is the next step is a new right for energy sharing in the EU electricity markets. You might be aware of it, basically giving customers the opportunity to sell excess electricity to their neighbors. It can either be shared locally or within the same bidding zones. And a central role is that DSOs really must facilitate this by setting up the necessary metering infrastructure. A key enabler for solar companies is also that they can finance these installations, becoming the one-stop shop for the citizens, so that if I go there as a citizen, I don't have to worry about anything, no payment, no organization, no administration. I do the contract with the third-party organizer, and they organize the rest for me, including finding all the off-takers for my electricity. It's a scheme that's already well underway in Europe. So we have the front runners, mostly Portugal, with a law adopted in 2019, with a reasonable geographic range ranging between 4 and 20 kilometers to share the electricity, allowing small residential buildings to participate, up to huge corporations being able to participate without a capacity threshold. We also see France, which has a reasonable okay framework with the possibility to share within 5 substations and for installations below 3 megawatt of capacity. So these schemes will now roll out across Europe. An interesting trend is that we're also increasingly seeing balancing markets becoming open to demand response. So that is already required by the EU electricity regulation from 2019. And it is market-based procurement of balancing services is already fairly spread across Europe. Where we still see a challenge is the demand response participation in so really aggregated small assets to be able to contribute. But we also see growth coming there, or opportunities for the necessary legislative changes coming there. There's an opportunity as well with the revision of the electricity balancing guideline in 2026 for simpler technical requirements and harmonized pre-qualification procedures, but also tailoring the products on balancing markets for weather-dependent resources. So next bucket is we now must accelerate demand. And the EU will now and has to push for electrification, and this is what we expect for the next legislative term. So from now 2025 to 2030, this will be one of the focus points of the European Commission. They have realized that electrification is the most cost-efficient way of decarbonizing. Carbon capture and storage, hydrogens are for the most cases boom and buzzwords. But electrification is to deliver the majority of the decarbonization. And we have found in our study that electrification will lower wholesale electricity prices and lower the total system costs when it comes to fossil fuel procurement, grid build out, all the things that you need to decarbonize an electricity system. The EU has seen that electrification rates are too low at 22%. Only 22% of the energy is being electric at the moment, which is very different in other countries in the world. So among the initiatives that the EU is proposing now is a clean industrial deal, which sets a KPI for economy-wide electrification of 32% in 2030. So that's a 10% increase in 5 years. So very, very ambitious plan. And they are backing it up with some legislative initiatives. So I'm just going to point out a few of them. One of them is the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act, which will have product labeling for end products. So a car will have a label on how green it is, what is the steel that's being used in the car, what is how is the other material used, how sustainable is the other material used in the car. So that gives a push to reducing emissions in end products. But we also foresee the Commission to do lead markets, so to have markets with products that receive a specific financial support in their decarbonization journey in order to become internationally competitive in these products. Second thing is a state aid framework, so subsidy framework for industrial electrification, which with a fast track process, making it easy for EU countries to subsidize this, in particularly all the heating processes below 500 degrees. We expect the European Commission to put forward an Electrification Action Plan in early 2026, outlining sector-specific tools which member states can use to support electrification in each sector. And lastly, there will be a funding mechanism from the EU with member state budget, the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, with a budget of 1 billion euro. And that is really geared towards developing pilot projects, helping the industry to do electrification projects, to learn and to overcome the inertia of the lack of awareness that we see in industrial electrification at the moment. And that, of course, will boost demand and ideally flexible demand. So moving forward, I see I'm a bit short of time. Another big thing is the energy security framework that will come with a proposal in Q1 2026. As you can imagine, the EU has a framework to make sure that grids are secure, that you have enough gas, that there are no cyber attacks, that the grids don't fall when there's a storm. And they are now checking this and making sure that it's future-proof. For us, this has a few opportunities. One is security of supply, building on local renewables generation. Then making sure that security supply is maintained under a decentralized electricity system, which where you don't have to make sure that you have a full enough gas tank, but you actually have to make sure that the storage assets in all the different locations are full enough at the right time, and that demand response is also delivering reliably to make sure that your electricity grid stays stable. Cyber attacks will also be in focus. The EU has acknowledged that aggregated demand assets are exposed to a number of threats, so this will be addressed in this plan as well. And then we also see potential for grid forming functionalities, which are probably more for the large scale segment. Last point is the EU will push grids. So there will be a grids package outlining binding and non-binding elements with publication in Q4 2025, mostly targeted at transmission grids at the moment, but we anticipate some elements on network planning, which is critical for introducing flexibility into network plans. So a grid operator has to plan 5 years in advance. Do I build a grid line, or do I set up a flexibility market, essentially as that? So here we see an opportunity. We also see a push for grid connections in small-scale PV. There will be the opportunity for fast-track procedures when you have local energy hubs, for example, or when there's industrial electrification with a direct line to a PV asset. So there are some opportunities to accelerate this. There's the network code for demand response coming, which sets out general principles for flexibility procurement. So all the roles and responsibility, data exchange requirements, these types of things will be set in stone in Q4 2025. We expect a standardization of flexibility procurement processes across all the 2,500 grid operators in Europe. So really facilitating scaling demand response services. And the fourth one is the network code requirements for generators. Sorry for the wrong title here. Requirements for generators is particularly relevant for grid forming services, making sure that we have market-based procurement of these services. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please join us in SolarPower Europe's Buildings and Prosumers workstream. We discuss these topics day in, day out. Our members are top informed on all these trends, and they exchange among them on what they mean for their businesses. So if you want to be a part of that, then contact us in SolarPower Europe, and we get you on board. Thanks a lot, Michael, for your presentation, for the time, and looking forward to a discussion with you.
Thanks, Jan. That was great. We will continue later on our panel in about after 2 more presentations. I think there are no questions. We're a little bit delayed in time. If there's any, please ask the questions in the chat. We will pick them up either in the next few minutes or during the panel.